When my wealthy husband said, "I invited my ex to your brother's wedding. Don't make a scene, I pay for everything. If you trust me, you'll get it," I smiled and said, "Of course, I do." Then I secretly invited her husband to be my plus one. The rehearsal dinner was unforgettable. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. I need to talk about something that happened, something that changed my life forever. It's not an easy story to tell, but I feel like I have to. Maybe someone out there needs to hear it. It all started, as these things often do, with a lie served at a family dinner. If you trust me, you'll get why I invited Paige to Cole's wedding. My husband, Garrett, announced this at Sunday dinner. Not quietly, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. He said it right between my mother passing the roasted potatoes and my father pouring his third glass of wine. A perfectly normal Sunday, shattered in an instant. My brother Cole's fork stopped halfway to his mouth, a piece of chicken suspended in midair. Across from me, his fiancée, Brooke, gave my leg a sharp kick under the table. Her eyes were wide. "Paige?" Cole asked, his voice slow and careful, like he was handling something explosive. "Your ex-girlfriend, Paige? To my wedding? The one I'm having next month?" "She's basically family," Garrett explained, not to Cole, but to my stunned parents. He sawed through his chicken with a deliberate calmness, as if he hadn't just dropped a grenade on our dining room table. He owned the space, the conversation, just like he owned everything else. "You remember how close we all were, right?" Nobody remembered. Of course, nobody remembered, because it never happened. But I watched, frozen, as my husband, the man I had shared a bed with for 4 years, constructed this elaborate, insulting lie right in front of my family. And in that moment, as everyone looked at me, expecting my reaction, I heard a voice I barely recognized as my own say, "Of course, honey. I completely understand." Garrett smiled, a tight, satisfied little smile that said, "See? She knows her place." He reached for the gravy boat, his victory assured. But he was a fool. Because what my wealthy, controlling husband didn't know was that I'd already found the name Reed Morrison 2 days ago. Paige's actual husband. And his phone number was already saved in my phone, waiting. Later, Garrett made his real reasoning clear, away from my parents' ears. In the car, his hand resting possessively on my thigh, he said, "Listen, Audrey. I know it's a little unusual. But I'm the one paying for this lifestyle, for the nice vacations, for your brother's overly expensive wedding gift. This is a small thing. Don't turn it into a big drama." He squeezed my knee. "Paige is just an old friend. It's a gesture of goodwill. It would be embarrassing for me if my wife made a scene. You understand, don't you?" It wasn't a question. It was an order wrapped in the silk of a condescending question. My role was to be the supportive, smiling wife who didn't question his decisions, especially not the ones that involved his ex-girlfriend. He thought his money, his high-powered job, his impressive salary gave him the right to dictate my feelings, to rewrite our family history, to parade his past in front of my future. I just smiled back, the same placid smile I'd perfected over the years. "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart." He was happy. He thought he had won. He had no idea he had just declared a war. The rest of that dinner was a masterclass in gaslighting. Garrett, feeling emboldened by my apparent submission, began to paint a rich, detailed portrait of a past that never existed. He turned to my mother, her smile looking tight and painted on. "You remember, Diane," he said with a warm, nostalgic laugh. "Paige helped you organize that big charity auction for the library. The one with the silent auction items? She was a lifesaver." My mother had never organized a charity auction in her life. She volunteered at the library, yes. She sorted donated books and ran the twice-a-year book sale from a folding table in the lobby. It was hardly a gala event needing an organizing committee. Yet, faced with Garrett's confident assertion, she just nodded slowly, a confused little frown playing on her lips. She was too polite, too conditioned to avoid conflict, to contradict her son-in-law in front of everyone. "Oh, such a sweet girl," Garrett continued, building his fiction brick by brick. "She's been dying to see everyone again. She's back in town for business, so the timing is just perfect." Brooke squeezed my knee harder under the table. She had been my friend long before she started dating my brother. She knew my history with Garrett. She knew that the name Paige had been uttered exactly twice in our entire relationship, dismissed as ancient history that was barely worth mentioning. My father cleared his throat, a deep rumble that usually signaled his discomfort. "Well, Garrett, if she's important to you, and to Audrey, of course." "She is," Garrett said firmly, finally turning his gaze to me. His eyes held something I'd never seen before. Not quite a challenge, but something close to it. A demand for public allegiance. "Right, Audrey?" The correct answer was no. The correct response was to flip the table over and ask him why on God's green earth he was inviting his ex-girlfriend to my brother's wedding. The correct move was to point out the staggering disrespect of this entire conversation. Instead, I smiled and passed him the butter dish. "Of course. We'd love to have her." Cole finally set his fork down completely, the metallic clink loud in the tense silence. "I really don't remember meeting any Paige. And I was home a lot from college." "You were probably buried in books," Garrett said smoothly. Too smoothly. He had rehearsed this. He had anticipated every objection and prepared his lies. "She was around a lot during that year you were prepping for your finals. We all used to hang out." This was fascinating in its sheer audacity. Cole had gone to the state university, just a 40-minute drive away. He was home nearly every other weekend, raiding the fridge and eating these very same Sunday dinners. If a woman named Paige had been around a lot, he would have met her. We all knew it. My father knew it, my mother knew it. But Garrett just kept going, adding brushstrokes to his masterpiece of deception. "She knows all the old family stories," he said, laughing at some private, non-existent memory. He looked at my dad. "Remember that time at the shore house? 4th of July, when the fireworks went sideways? Paige still talks about that. We didn't have a shore house. We had rented one, once, 5 years ago, long after Paige was supposedly out of his life. But my parents exchanged a confused glance, their brows furrowed as they tried to recall a memory that simply didn't exist, all while their son-in-law rewrote their lives over a pot roast. It was surreal. He was recruiting my own family into his delusion, and I was his silent, smiling accomplice. The perfect wife. Here's the thing. I wasn't an accomplice. I was a spy. The reason I could sit there, smiling serenely while my husband dismantled our shared reality, was because I already knew the truth. The discovery had been completely accidental, a fluke of the internet a couple of days earlier. It was a Saturday morning. I was sitting on the couch with my coffee, scrolling through my phone, looking for a new yoga studio. An Instagram profile popped up in my suggested for you feed. Paige Morrison. The picture was of a blonde woman laughing, holding a glass of wine on a rooftop bar overlooking the city. The same Paige from the one photo Garrett had ever shown me, from his college days. He told me she moved to Seattle 3 years ago to work for some big tech startup. A clean break, he'd said. But her recent posts weren't tagged in Seattle. They were all tagged right here in Manhattan. Brunches in Soho. Morning runs in Central Park. And then, as I scrolled back, my blood ran cold. A wedding photo. From 2 years ago. Paige, in a stunning white dress, kissing a handsome, broad-shouldered man. The caption read, 2 years with my forever, Reed Morrison. The tag led to his profile, Reed Morrison, real estate developer. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. For a full 10 minutes, I just sat there, the coffee growing cold in my hands, staring at the screen. She hadn't moved away. She was married. And my husband was either a pathological liar or something much worse. I did something I'd never done before. I took a screenshot. Then another. And another. I found Reed Morrison's business website. His direct phone number was listed right there on the Contact Us page. My finger hovered over the screen. With a shaking hand, I created a new contact. Reed Morrison. And I saved the number. I didn't know why. It just felt like ammunition. So when Garrett sat at my parents' dinner table, spinning his web of lies, I wasn't confused. I was furious. But it was a cold, quiet fury. It was the kind of anger that doesn't scream, it plans. After dinner, in the kitchen, Cole cornered me by the dishwasher while Garrett was in the living room charming my father with a fake story about a golf game. "Audrey, what is going on?" Cole's voice was a low, urgent whisper. "I have never met this woman. Mom and Dad have never met her. Why is Garrett acting like she's some long-lost family friend?" I focused on scraping a plate, the sound of the fork against the ceramic grating on my nerves. I couldn't look him in the eye. "Maybe you just don't remember, Cole. It was a long time ago." "Stop." He gently grabbed my wrist. "This is me. Tell me what's happening." Brooke appeared in the doorway, standing guard, her arms crossed. Through the doorway, I could hear Garrett laughing at something my father said. The sound made my skin crawl. "I can't," I whispered, finally looking at my brother. "Not yet. Just trust me, okay? And please, just act normal about Paige coming to the wedding." Cole's face went through a dozen expressions: confusion, frustration, and finally, deep concern. He's my baby brother, but he'd always been my protector. He wanted to argue, I could see it. He wanted to march into that living room and demand answers. But something in my face, some desperate plea, made him step back. He nodded slowly. "Okay. But if you need anything, Audrey. Anything at all." "I know." As I stood there, a plan began to form in my mind, sharp and clear and terrifying. If Garrett wanted to bring his ex to my brother's wedding, if he wanted to play this dangerous game in front of my whole family, then I would make sure he wasn't the only one with a surprise guest. Reed Morrison would be my +1. And together, we'd give Garrett and Paige a reunion they would never, ever forget. The war began on Monday morning. Garrett left for work after kissing my forehead, his expensive new cologne lingering in the air like a taunt. The apartment, our beautiful home that I had so lovingly decorated, suddenly felt like a crime scene. I waited exactly 10 minutes after hearing the ding of the elevator before I opened my laptop. My war room was the kitchen table. My first target was Paige Morrison's Instagram account. Public profile. 847 posts. Each one a potential clue. I created a new, heavily encrypted folder on my desktop, naming it something boring, Tax Documents 2025. Then, I started scrolling, screenshotting methodically, going backward in time. Her life unfolded before me in a curated stream of perfection. Recent yoga classes in Tribeca. Wine tastings in Brooklyn. Art gallery openings where she wore dresses that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. And then, I found him. Reed Morrison. He first appeared in that wedding photo from 2 years ago. Tall, with kind, tired eyes that suggested he worked too much. His own profile was private, but his company page, Morrison Properties, was wide open to the public. It was a gold mine. I found a news and events section. And there it was. My first real piece of concrete evidence. Boston Real Estate Summit, March 15th to 17th. My breath hitched in my throat. I remembered that weekend perfectly. Garrett had an emergency investor meeting in Boston. An unexpected, last-minute trip. I remembered the choppy video call where he tried to show me his hotel room, but accidentally panned past the window, revealing a lobby sign for a split second. The Marriott Copley Place. My hands trembled as I clicked on the newsletter for the Boston Real Estate Summit on Reed's company site. The official conference hotel, listed in bold letters, the Marriott Copley Place. It felt like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just paranoid. I wasn't just jealous. This was real. I became a forensic accountant of their lives. I cross-referenced everything. Reed's LinkedIn post from that weekend about productive morning sessions, timestamped at 9 a.m. Garrett's text to me about a breakfast meeting running long, sent at 9:07 a.m. And then, the nail in the coffin, Paige's Instagram story from that same morning. It was just a picture of a coffee cup on a table in a hotel lounge. No caption. But on her finger, I saw it. A delicate pearl ring. A ring I had never seen before, but one that seemed eerily similar to a charge I would later find on our credit card statement. The location tag on the post? The Marriott Copley Place. It was a symphony of deception, and I was finally hearing every note. My coffee went cold on the table next to me as I worked, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was just day one. And I already knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was just the beginning. The folder named Tax Documents was about to get very, very full. Day 2 was Tuesday. I called in sick to my job as a graphic designer, my voice sounding convincingly hoarse over the phone. A terrible head cold, I'd said. The only thing I felt was a cold, hard knot of determination in my stomach. It was time to leave the digital world and find physical proof. Garrett's new fitness kick had started about 3 months ago. He joined a high-end gym across town, going religiously on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. For my health, he'd claimed, patting his stomach that hadn't actually gotten any smaller despite the supposed hours of cardio. His workout window was from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. At 11:30 a.m., I drove to the gym's parking garage. I circled every level, my eyes scanning for his sleek black Mercedes. It wasn't there. A part of me, a small, hopeful part, thought maybe he'd taken a cab. But the cold knot in my stomach told me otherwise. I had a hunch. I remembered a selfie Paige had posted a few weeks ago, posing in a hotel lobby with the caption, "The best client lunches happen here." I had recognized the distinctive Art Deco wallpaper. It was the Greenwich Hotel, a ridiculously expensive boutique hotel downtown. I drove the 14 blocks, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. As I turned onto the street, I saw it. Parked right in front, with the valet tag still hanging from the mirror, was Garrett's Mercedes. I pulled over across the street, my car idling. I felt dizzy, nauseous. This was real. He wasn't at the gym. He was here. I waited. Just as I was about to drive away, my heart unable to take any more, the hotel's main door opened. Garrett walked out, followed a moment later by Paige. They weren't holding hands, but the space between them was charged, intimate. He said something, and she laughed, throwing her head back. The sound was silent from behind my car window, but I could feel the carefree intimacy of it. He handed the valet his ticket, and they stood there, talking, until his car pulled up. He got in, and she walked away down the street, disappearing around the corner. On Wednesday, I faced the final frontier, our finances. Garrett had always handled the money. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it," he'd say whenever I asked. "I make a great salary, I handle the investments, you just enjoy it." It was another form of control, I realized now. He had the financial power. I logged into our joint credit card account, something I hadn't done in years. The entries read like a confession written in dollars and cents. There was a charge for $400 at 11 Madison Park, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. The date was a Tuesday night 6 weeks ago, a night he claimed he was entertaining clients from Tokyo who had flown in for a major deal. But my stomach clenched when I saw the date. I scrolled through Paige's Instagram feed on my phone. And there it was. A post from that exact same evening. A picture of two champagne flutes clinking together. The caption was just a single heart emoji. Date night. Then I saw the charge that made my vision blur. Cartier. $2,847. Dated 3 weeks ago. Our anniversary was 6 months away. My birthday had just passed. I hadn't received anything from Cartier. But in Paige's recent photos, she was wearing a new pearl bracelet, a delicate, expensive-looking piece that matched the ring from the Boston photo. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. I started photographing every single line item with my phone, creating a backup of my backup. A charge at a lingerie store, La Perla, for an amount that made my eyes water. It certainly hadn't produced anything that ended up in my drawer. Theater tickets for a Wednesday matinee when he was supposedly in back-to-back meetings for a huge company merger. It was all there. A detailed, itemized history of his betrayal, paid for with our money. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was making me pay for it. The wedding was less than 2 weeks away, and Garrett's behavior escalated from suspicious to outright bizarre. His focus wasn't on helping me with my bridesmaid duties or asking about my brother, it was entirely on ensuring Paige's comfort and prominence at the event. He became obsessed with the seating chart. Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was Cole, and his voice was tight with a mixture of confusion and frustration. "Audrey, what is going on with Garrett?" "Seriously. He's called me 3 times today about the seating chart." I closed my laptop, pressing the phone closer to my ear. My desk was covered in printed-out bank statements, a sea of incriminating paper. "What about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "He keeps insisting that Paige needs a table with a good view of the ceremony. He actually suggested moving Aunt Patricia to accommodate her." Aunt Patricia. Our great-aunt, who is 93 years old and my father's favorite sister. The matriarch of our family. And get this, Cole continued, his voice rising in disbelief. He offered to pay for Paige's hotel room for the weekend. Said it was his wedding gift to us. What kind of a wedding gift is paying for your ex-girlfriend's accommodation? I knew exactly what kind. The kind that meant he planned on spending the night with her, using my brother's wedding as a cover. The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of it made it hard to breathe. "Audrey? Are you there? Should I be worried? Is everything okay between you two?" The genuine concern in my little brother's voice nearly broke me. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to unleash his protective rage on Garrett. But not yet. The plan wasn't ready. "We're fine, Cole," I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "He's just trying to be friendly, I guess. You know how he is about appearances." Cole's silence on the other end of the line told me he didn't buy it for a second, but he let it drop. The final straw came the following Monday, just 5 days before the wedding. Cole called me again, and this time, he was furious. "You are not going to believe this. Garrett just cornered me in the lobby of my office building. He must have been waiting for me." "What did he do?" "He handed me an envelope. A thick, white envelope. I opened it, and inside was $500. In cash." I was speechless. He said it was for my trouble to move Paige to the main family table. He said, "Just tell everyone the venue made a mistake. It's no big deal." $500, Audrey. He tried to bribe me. At my own wedding. To put his ex-girlfriend at the table with our 93-year-old great-aunt. I sank down onto my couch, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. This wasn't just an affair. This was a man who believed his money could buy anything, compliance, silence, even a seat at my family's table for his mistress. He wasn't just disrespecting me, he was disrespecting my entire family, so certain in his power and wealth that he thought no one would dare to challenge him. The arrogance was astounding. He wasn't just cheating, he was trying to normalize it, to integrate his affair into the fabric of our family life, using cash as his tool. He had made a grave miscalculation. He had underestimated me. And he had no idea that I was about to make him pay a price that no amount of money could cover. The envelope of cash was the final piece of the puzzle. It was time. That afternoon, sitting in my home office with the door locked, I opened a new email. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady as they moved across the keyboard. I pulled up Reed Morrison's business email from his company website. For an hour, I stared at the blank screen. How do you tell a complete stranger that their marriage is a lie? How do you introduce yourself as the wife of the man their wife is sleeping with? I wrote and deleted 20 different drafts. Some were long and rambling, full of apologies. Others were angry and accusatory. Finally, I realized the only way to do it was to be simple, direct, and undeniable. I typed out a single sentence. Subject: my brother's wedding. Dear Mr. Morrison, your wife, Paige, is attending my brother's wedding this weekend as my husband's guest. Sincerely, Audrey Miller. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once I hit send, there was no going back to the comfortable ignorance, no pretending I didn't know. This would detonate everything. My marriage, his marriage, all of it. I took a deep breath and clicked. Then, I drove to a coffee shop across town, a place I never went to, ordered a latte I didn't drink, and waited. My phone sat face up on the table, silent for what felt like an eternity. Customers came and went. The barista asked twice if I was okay. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, dust motes dancing in the light. At 4:15 p.m., the phone buzzed. It was an email notification. My whole body went rigid. Subject: my brother's wedding. I've been suspicious for months. Let's meet. Read. 7 words. 7 words that confirmed everything and yet revealed nothing. He knew. Or at least, he suspected. We were 2 strangers, about to be united by the most intimate betrayal. I typed back immediately, my fingers flying. Financial District Starbucks. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. His response came back in less than a minute. I'll be there. I'll bring proof. Proof. As if my folder of screenshots and highlighted credit card statements wasn't enough. As if we needed any more evidence that our spouses were liars who had turned our marriages into an elaborate theater. But his words also gave me a strange sense of comfort. I wasn't alone in this. I had an ally. The weekend crawled by with excruciating slowness. Garrett was home, playing the part of the devoted husband, humming off-key to jazz music while he made breakfast on Sunday. His grilled pancakes, I had started calling them in my head. I smiled, ate 2 bites, and claimed an upset stomach. Monday morning finally arrived. I left the apartment at my usual time, but instead of driving to my office, I headed downtown. The Starbucks on Pearl Street was crowded, buzzing with the energy of Wall Street. I ordered an espresso I didn't want and claimed a small table in the corner where I could watch the door. At exactly 10 a.m., Reed Morrison walked in. I knew him instantly from his photos, but in person, there was a weight to him, a careful, deliberate way he moved, like someone who had learned not to trust the ground beneath his feet. He scanned the room and his eyes locked on mine. He knew me, too. We were wearing the same shell-shocked expression. Audrey, he said, his voice deeper and rougher than I'd expected. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He just pulled out the chair across from me and sat down heavily. He pulled a thick manila envelope from his messenger bag before he even thought about ordering coffee. I brought receipts, he said without any preamble. 6 months' worth. He slid a stack of papers across the table. Credit card statements with charges highlighted in bright yellow. Hotel bills. Restaurant receipts. My hands shook slightly as I picked up the first one. The Ritz-Carlton, Miami. Valentine's Day weekend. A charge for $3,200 that included a couple's massage, champagne service, and a late checkout. Paige said it was a work incentive trip, Reed explained, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. For top performers at her marketing firm. Except I called her company's HR department last month. They don't do incentive trips. Haven't in 3 years, due to budget cuts. The next receipt was from 11 Madison Park. The same $400 dinner for two that I had found on my statement. This was their anniversary dinner, Reed said, pointing to the date. The anniversary of when they first started dating in college. She used to celebrate it every year. This year, she told me she was working late on a big project. I pulled up my own phone, opened the tax documents folder, and showed him my evidence. Garrett's calendar has fake meetings with the Thompson account every Tuesday and Thursday. I called his boss's secretary, pretending to be confirming a lunch. She told me Garrett has no Thompson account. Those meetings never existed. Reed let out a harsh, broken laugh that wasn't a laugh at all. Paige has him saved in her phone as Jason Pilates. I found that out when her actual Pilates instructor called our house about a scheduling change, and I got confused. She almost had a heart attack when I asked who Jason was. We spent the next hour hunched over that small table, creating a timeline on coffee shop napkins. We were two generals mapping out the enemy's campaign. Every business trip Garrett took aligned with a conference Paige attended. Every late night he worked matched a work emergency she had. Every weekend he was away on a golf trip corresponded with a spa weekend with the girls for her. Miami conference, I wrote, drawing an arrow to Reed's Ritz-Carlton receipt. Boston Summit, he added, connecting it to my Marriott Copley Place evidence. Golf weekend, I scribbled, linking it to Paige's spa retreat Instagram posts from a weekend when it had rained torrentially, and no golf course in a 50-mile radius would have been open. The pattern was so clear, so insultingly obvious once we laid it all out. They had been carrying on for at least 6 months, probably longer. The recent intensity, Garrett's new clothes, Paige's new jewelry, suggested things were escalating. The wedding, Reed said suddenly, staring at our makeshift timeline. Your brother's wedding. They're planning something big for that weekend. I nodded, my stomach churning. Garrett's been obsessing over the seating arrangements. He bribed my brother with $500 to get Paige a seat at the main family table. Paige bought a new dress, Reed said, his voice grim. $3,000, from Bergdorf's. She told me it was for her company's annual gala. I checked. There is no gala scheduled for this year. We sat in silence for a moment, the bustling noise of the coffee shop fading into a dull roar. Two strangers, our lives now irrevocably intertwined by the implosion of our marriages. So what do you want to do? Reed asked finally, his eyes meeting mine. We could confront them privately. Pack their bags, change the locks, have a lawyer serve the divorce papers. Clean and simple. I thought about it. The civilized route. The mature response. The path that would minimize drama and preserve some semblance of dignity. Then I remembered Garrett at my parents' dinner table, lying to their faces, making them feel foolish in their own home. Or, I prompted. A ghost of a smile, the first I'd seen, crossed Reed's face. Or we could give them exactly what they want. A wedding weekend together. Just not the one they planned. The idea was insane. It was petty. It was potentially explosive. It was also perfect. You mean, I started, the plan blooming in my mind. You come to the rehearsal dinner. As my plus one. They walk in, expecting a secret rendezvous, he finished, leaning forward, his eyes alight with a dangerous spark. And instead, they find us. Together. At the family table. Public accountability. No room for denial. No space for gaslighting. Their lies, exposed for everyone to see. Are you sure about this? Reed asked as we prepared to leave, the napkins covered in our timeline of deceit crumpled in his hand. Once we do this, there's no going back. Our marriages are over. They're already over, I replied, surprised by my own certainty. We're just the last ones to know. The 5 days leading up to the rehearsal dinner were the most surreal of my life. It was as if Garrett, sensing the impending doom he was orchestrating, decided to play the role of the perfect husband with an Oscar-worthy intensity. It was guilt, pure and simple, and it was nauseating to watch. On Tuesday, I came home from work to find him in the kitchen, wearing an apron, something I hadn't seen him do in 2 years. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled our apartment. He was making chicken piccata, my favorite dish, the one he'd cooked on our 3rd date, the night I knew I was falling for him. Perfect timing, he said, not looking up from the sizzling pan. Dinner's almost ready. Open that Pinot Grigio in the fridge, will you? I uncorked the wine with steady hands, though inside I felt like I was screaming. This was guilt cooking. Every perfectly placed caper, every sprig of parsley was an attempt to balance some internal scale of his. What's the occasion? I asked, handing him a glass. Does there have to be an occasion to cook for my beautiful wife? The word beautiful stuck in my throat. He hadn't called me that in months. Now, with Paige's arrival just days away, I was suddenly visible to him again. I was a prop in his play, the unsuspecting wife who made his affair feel more thrilling, more dangerous. Wednesday brought flowers. Not just a grocery store bouquet. Peonies. A huge, extravagant bunch of soft pink peonies from the ridiculously expensive florist on Madison Avenue, the kind that cost $30 a stem. He had forgotten my birthday last year, genuinely forgotten, until my mother called to wish me a happy birthday while he was sitting right next to me. But now, 3 days before he planned to spend a wedding weekend with his ex, he remembered my favorite flower. Saw them and thought of you, he said, kissing my cheek as I arranged them in a vase. His lips felt like a brand, marking me as the fool he thought I was. That afternoon, while he was at his supposed gym session, I went shopping. It wasn't browsing, it was hunting. I needed armor for Saturday night, something that would make me feel powerful when my world was about to explode. I found it in the 3rd store I went into, an emerald green dress. It was sophisticated and elegant, but the color was bold, almost dangerous. It hugged my body without clinging. It made me look like a woman who was not to be trifled with. Special occasion, the saleswoman asked as I turned in front of the mirror. You could say that, I replied with a tight smile. A funeral, of sorts. She laughed, thinking I was joking. I bought the dress and a pair of wickedly high heels to match. Heels high enough to look him directly in the eye when everything fell apart. Thursday night, Garrett offered me a foot massage while we watched TV. He pulled my feet into his lap, his thumbs working the arches with a practice pressure that used to make me melt. Now, it just felt like a violation. His phone buzzed every few minutes on the side table. Each time, his hands would pause for a fraction of a second, his eyes flicking to the screen, but he didn't pick it up. The restraint must have been killing him. Who keeps texting? I asked, my voice a perfect imitation of innocent curiosity. Just work stuff, he said, not missing a beat. Johnson's being demanding about the quarterly reports. Johnson was his supervisor, who, according to a cheerful out-of-office reply I'd received earlier that day, was on vacation in Bermuda all week. I took a photo with my phone, a subtle shot of him massaging my feet, his wedding ring clearly visible, the TV in the background showing the timestamp. I sent it to Reed. My caption, "The guilt is strong tonight." His reply came back instantly, Paige must be getting excited. She just spent an hour on the phone with her friend from work, giggling in the bathroom. The performance was almost over. The curtain was about to rise. Saturday arrived with the kind of bright, cloudless sky that felt like a cruel joke. The Waldorf Astoria lobby buzzed with the happy energy of a wedding weekend. I stood near the check-in desk, a fixed smile on my face, playing the role of the serene sister of the groom. Each relative who arrived required a performance of normalcy I wasn't sure I could maintain. "Audrey, darling," my Aunt Margaret swooped in, her pearls catching the light from the chandeliers. "You look lovely. Where's that handsome husband of yours?" "He's on his way," I said, accepting her powdery cheek kiss. "Just helping an old friend get settled in." Garrett appeared moments later, his hand finding the small of my back with a practiced intimacy that made my skin burn. He was wearing his new Tom Ford suit, the one he'd hidden in the back of his closet. His teeth seemed blindingly white when he smiled at my aunt. "Margaret, you look 20 years younger," he charmed, and she actually giggled. He was working the room like a politician on election night, shaking hands, remembering names, deploying compliments like currency. He was purchasing goodwill he would soon desperately need. His phone kept vibrating in his pocket, a subtle tremor against my hip. He didn't check it, but his fingers tightened on my waist each time. Paige, no doubt, texting her excitement. The private dining room for the rehearsal dinner at Lou Bernardine's was glowing. Soft lights, fresh flowers, the clinking of champagne flutes. My parents were already there, arranging place cards with the obsessive attention to detail that made them perfect hosts. My mother looked up as I walked in. "Darling, you look stunning. That dress is incredible." "Thanks, Mom." I walked over to the main family table. And there it was. A place card with the name Paige beautifully calligraphed on it, nestled right between Garrett's seat and an empty chair. The chair he had paid $500 to secure for her. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the smooth cardstock, and placed it back down. Everything looks perfect. The room began to fill. Cousins, uncles, old family friends. I made small talk about the weather, about my brother's nerves, about anything other than the bomb that was set to detonate in less than an hour. At 7:10 p.m., my phone vibrated in my clutch. It was Reed. They just walked into the hotel lobby together. His hand is on her back. They're laughing. My fingers were surprisingly steady as I typed back. "Incoming." I positioned myself near the entrance, a flute of untouched champagne in my hand as a prop. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but on the outside, I was a statue of calm. The avalanche was rolling. There was no stopping it now. At 7:15, the door to the private dining room opened. Garrett walked in first, his face glowing with the smug satisfaction of a man who believed he was getting away with everything. And right behind him was Paige. She was wearing a slinky, eye-wateringly expensive Versace dress. Her blonde hair cascaded over her bare shoulders. She looked exactly like the kind of woman men destroyed their lives for. They moved through the room as a unit. Not as friends, but as a couple. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back. She laughed at something he whispered in her ear. I saw my mother's welcoming smile falter, replaced by a flicker of confusion. I saw my father's eyes narrow. I saw Cole stand up slowly from his seat, his napkin falling to the floor. Garrett brought her straight to me, a predator bringing his prize to the den. He was going to get the introduction over with quickly, neutralize any potential awkwardness with his overwhelming charm and confidence. He had no idea he was walking into his own execution. "Darling," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek while Paige watched with a look of barely concealed triumph. "This is Paige. Paige, this is my wife, Audrey." "So lovely to finally meet you," Paige purred, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Her wrist was adorned with the Cartier pearl bracelet. "Garrett has told me so much about you." I took her hand. It was cold. "Has he?" I said, my voice sweet as poison. "How interesting. Because he's told me almost nothing about you." And right at that moment, as Paige's smile tightened, the door opened again. Reed Morrison walked into the room like he owned it. He was 6'3", dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that made him look less like a real estate developer and more like a man who had come to collect a debt. He paused in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room with a deliberate slowness, letting everyone see him, letting the silence build. The conversations nearest the entrance died first. Then a ripple of quiet spread through the room as heads turned to watch the stranger's progress. The air grew thick with unspoken questions. Garrett's hand, which had been resting on Paige's back, dropped to his side. Paige's triumphant expression dissolved into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. "Sorry I'm late," Reed said, his voice cutting through the sudden quiet like a razor. "Traffic was murder." He started walking towards our group. Towards me. And that's when the champagne glass slipped from Paige's hand. It didn't just drop. It shattered. The crystal exploded against the marble floor with a sound like breaking bells, sharp and final. Golden liquid splashed across the hem of her Versace dress and her designer shoes. The entire room froze. Every eye was on the spreading puddle of champagne, the glittering shards of glass, and the woman standing in the middle of it all, her face the color of old paper. "Reed?" Paige's voice was a strangled whisper. Her carefully applied makeup suddenly looked garish against her bloodless skin. Garrett's body went rigid. He took a protective step in front of Paige, his face twisting into a scowl. "Who are you? You're not invited. This is a private family event." "Actually," I said, my voice ringing out, clear and calm. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, smoothing the emerald fabric of my dress. "He is invited." I smiled, a wide, bright, terrifying smile. "He's my +1. I held out my hand to Reed, who was now standing beside me. "Reed, honey, come sit down. Your seat is right next to mine." The word honey landed like a grenade. My mother's hand flew to her throat. My brother Cole's mouth fell open. Across the room, I saw Brooke pull out her phone, and a tiny red recording light blinked on. "Audrey, what is the meaning of this?" my father demanded, his voice carrying the authority of a man who did not tolerate nonsense. Reed ignored him. He walked right through the wreckage of the shattered champagne glass, his expensive leather shoes crunching on the crystal shards. He stopped in front of Garrett and Paige, who looked like two cornered animals. And he began to speak. "What's going on?" Reed said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the now silent room, "is that my wife and your son-in-law have been having an affair for at least 6 months. He pulled his phone from his suit pocket, his movements efficient and practiced. "Should I start with the Valentine's Day weekend in Miami she told me was a work incentive trip, or the real estate conference in Boston where they shared a room at the Marriott Copley Place?" That's not true." "We didn't," Paige stammered, trying to take a step back, but her heel caught in the wet hem of her dress, and she stumbled. "Save it, Paige," Reed said, his voice flat and terrible. "I have receipts. I have credit card statements. I have the text messages where you saved his number as Jason Pilates." "Really, Paige? Pilates?" Garrett's face cycled through a series of emotions, shock, rage, calculation, before settling on a mask of indignant denial. He spread his hands in a gesture of placating reason. "This is ridiculous. This is a misunderstanding. Paige and I are old friends. Audrey knows that. She understands." "Oh, I understand plenty," I interrupted, pulling my own phone from my clutch. I had my tax documents folder open. "I understand how your Thompson account meetings, the ones you had every Tuesday and Thursday for the last 6 months, never actually existed. Your boss's secretary was very helpful in confirming that for me when I called." My cousin Barbara gasped audibly. Someone near the back dropped a fork. The clatter was deafening. "The jewelry receipt was particularly interesting, too," I continued, scrolling through my photo gallery. $2, $8.47 at Cartier, 3 weeks ago. "Our anniversary isn't for another 6 months, Garrett." But Paige is wearing a beautiful new pearl bracelet tonight. What a coincidence. Paige's hand flew to her wrist, covering the bracelet as if she could make it disappear by sheer force of will. The hotel charges were my favorite part, Reed added, his voice gaining momentum. The St. Regis, for times in the past 2 months. Always on nights when Paige had client dinners and Garrett had late conferences. And the lingerie, Garrett. A friend doesn't buy another man's wife $800 worth of lingerie from La Perla. I found the receipt hidden in her jewelry box. My mother, a woman who prized etiquette and decorum above all else, stood up. Her face was a masterpiece of controlled fury. Garrett. Is this true? Have you been carrying on with this woman while married to my daughter? He tried his charm one last time. Diane, this is all being blown way out of proportion. Paige needed support during a difficult time. I was just being a friend. The room went completely silent. Everyone was leaning in, hanging on every word. My father stood up then, slowly, deliberately, like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. He pointed a finger toward the door. Garrett. Paige. You need to leave. Now. But, Garrett started. Now, my father's voice boomed, echoing in the silent room. It was a voice that brooked no argument. Before I have hotel security escort you out. Garrett and Paige stood frozen for a moment, the entire room staring at them. Humiliation washed over their faces. Paige grabbed Garrett's arm, her knuckles white. Let's go. But Garrett wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. And for the first time, I saw real loss in his eyes. Not guilt, not remorse for what he'd done, but the dawning, selfish realization of what he had just thrown away. His comfortable life, his respectable image, his compliant wife. Audrey, don't do this, he said, his voice low. I'm not doing anything, I replied simply. You did this. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. It lets me know you're here with me, that you're on this journey with me, and honestly, your support means the world to me right now. It gives me the strength to keep going. Please, comment the number 1 so I can see you, and now, let me tell you what happened next. Hannah pulled him toward the door, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. But at the threshold, Garrett turned back, his face a mask of cold fury. This isn't over, he said, a low, threatening promise. I raised my champagne glass, the one I'd been holding for an hour, and finally took a sip. The bubbles fizzed on my tongue. Actually, it is, I said. My lawyer will be in touch on Monday. They left. The door closed behind them with a soft, final click. And the room erupted. For a full 10 seconds, the room remained in a state of suspended shock. Then, my Uncle Richard, a man I'd only ever seen get emotional about football, started to slow clap. Aunt Margaret joined in. Soon, half the room was applauding while the other half just sat there, mouths agape. My mother, my proper, etiquette-obsessed mother, started laughing. Not a hysterical laugh, but a deep, genuine, appreciative one. That's my daughter, she said, raising her own champagne glass in a toast to me. That's my brilliant daughter. The rest of the dinner passed in a surreal blur. The staff at Lou Bernardine's, true professionals, cleared away the shattered glass and served the main course as if a public execution hadn't just taken place. Reed and I ended up sitting together at the family table, the 2 empty chairs where Garrett and Paige should have been gaping like missing teeth. The story of the takedown was already becoming legend. My grandmother, 91 and sharp as a tack, cackled from her wheelchair. Best rehearsal dinner I've been to in 70 years, she announced to the table. Better than your cousin's, where the bride's father punched the groom. The next day was the wedding. It was beautiful. Cole and Brooke exchanged their vows in the hotel garden under a perfect blue sky. There were no empty chairs, no unwanted guests, just 2 people promising to love each other honestly. It was everything a wedding should be. The peace, however, was short-lived. During the cake cutting, my phone, which I had forgotten to turn off, started buzzing incessantly. It was a text from a friend with a screenshot. Paige had posted on Instagram. It was a picture of her looking pensively out a window, with a long caption, "Sometimes you learn that the people you trusted are the most toxic." When someone's insecure spouse can't let go of the past and creates elaborate, public scenes to embarrass you, it only shows their true character. Rising above the negativity and focusing on my truth. The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to flip the narrative, to paint herself as the victim of a crazy, jealous wife. The initial comments were supportive, "You're so strong. Hang in there," from friends who didn't know any better. She underestimated Reed. An hour later, he posted on his own Facebook page, making it public and tagging enough mutual business connections to ensure maximum visibility. He didn't write a long, emotional post. He just posted a simple timeline. February 14th, Paige at work retreat/receipt from Miami Ritz-Carlton for 2. March 15th to 17th, Paige at conference/Boston hotel charges matching Garrett Miller's stay at April 22nd, Paige buying work clothes/La Perla receipt $4,800. May 10th, Paige at client dinner/reservation for 2 at 11 Madison Park. He ended the post with a simple, devastating sentence, "Receipts don't lie. People do." The effect was immediate and catastrophic for her. Within an hour, Paige's post had disappeared. The comments on Reed's timeline exploded. Friends expressed shock. Someone from Paige's company commented that there hadn't been a work retreat in February. Another acquaintance mentioned seeing her at a restaurant with a man who definitely wasn't Reed. Her carefully constructed world of lies was publicly dismantled, comment by comment. It was brutal. And it was exactly what she deserved. By Monday morning, the consequences began to rain down. Garrett had texted me 18 times and called a dozen more. I didn't read the texts or answer the calls. I just screenshot everything and forwarded it to the new contact in my phone, Randall Clearwater, divorce attorney. My father had already made me an appointment. Then came the calls from his family. His sister, then his mother, both leaving tearful voicemails about not throwing away a marriage over a simple misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. 6 months of calculated deception, of lies and theft and gaslighting, reduced to a misunderstanding. The delusion, apparently, ran in the family. That evening, my best friend, Sarah, came over with 2 things, pizza and packing boxes. "We're erasing him," she announced, kicking a box into the middle of the living room. Every trace. We went through the apartment methodically. It felt like an exorcism. His clothes went into boxes, which I labeled with the dates of his fake meetings. Thompson account, February 10th. Golf weekend, March 3rd. His toiletries, his pretentious collection of vinyl records, his expensive watches he'd spent our savings on while telling me we needed to cut back on groceries. For years of marriage fit neatly into 12 cardboard boxes. "Do you want to keep anything?" Sarah asked gently, holding up our wedding album. I took it from her and flipped through it once. There we were, so young and hopeful, believing in a forever that was built on a foundation of lies. I closed it and handed it back. "Ship it to his mother. She's the one who paid for the photographer." The news of their downfall came in bits and pieces over the next few weeks. A friend who worked in finance called to tell me that the partners at Garrett's firm had suggested he seek other opportunities. The public scandal, especially the part about him trying to bribe my brother, was a breach of professional conduct they couldn't ignore. His LinkedIn profile was quietly updated to independent consultant, which everyone knew was code for unemployed with too much ego to admit it. Reed told me that Paige's boutique marketing firm had mysteriously lost 2 of its major investors, both of whom had heard about the scandal through New York's impossibly small professional network. It turns out nobody wants their family-friendly brand managed by someone who became infamous for trying to destroy a family at a rehearsal dinner. It should have felt like a victory, but mostly, I just felt tired. Their downfall wasn't my revenge. It was just gravity. They had jumped off a cliff of their own making. I had just refused to fall with them. 3 months passed in a blur of legal paperwork, packing tape, and quiet evenings that felt both empty and incredibly full. The day the final divorce papers arrived from Randall Clearwater's office was an innocuous Tuesday. The manila envelope sat on my new kitchen table, my table, not ours, and I stared at it for a full hour before I had the courage to open it. I pulled out the heavy, cream-colored paper and the Mont Blanc pen Garrett had given me for our second anniversary. It was an obscenely expensive, heavy pen, a symbol of the wealth and status he valued so much. The irony wasn't lost on me as I twisted the cap off. This gift, once a symbol of his supposed affection, was now the instrument of my freedom. I signed my married name for the very last time. Audrey Miller. The ink was a deep, definitive black. With each stroke, it felt like I was shedding a layer of skin, peeling away a version of myself that no longer existed. The woman who smiled politely at lies, who accepted condescension wrapped in compliments, who made herself smaller to fit into the grand stage of his life. As I signed the final page, I wasn't just ending a marriage, I was reclaiming my own name, my own story. Audrey Miller was dissolving back into Audrey Carver, the woman I had been before him, but stronger, wiser, and with a hell of a lot more scars. After sliding the papers back into the envelope to be mailed, I picked up my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. I texted Reed. Papers signed. Coffee? Pearl Street Starbucks in an hour. We need to celebrate. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at our usual corner table with 2 lattes waiting. He looked different, lighter somehow, as if gravity had loosened its grip on him. The pale, faint indent where his wedding ring used to be was almost gone, a fading ghost of a life left behind. To freedom, he said, raising his paper cup in a toast. To surviving, I countered, clinking my cup against his. We laughed, a real, unburdened laugh at the absurdity of it all, toasting the end of our marriages with lukewarm lattes in a crowded coffee shop. It was the most honest celebration I'd had in years. Did you hear about Garrett? Reed asked, scrolling through his phone. LinkedIn says he's seeking new opportunities. Translation, fired, I said, taking a sip of my latte. It was true. The partners at his firm, men who valued their company's pristine reputation and professional conduct above all, had a very dim view of the scandal. Humiliating your wife and bribing your brother-in-law at a family event wasn't exactly good for business. He'd lost his 6-figure salary, his expense account, his entire identity. Paige isn't doing much better, Reed continued, his voice neutral. She lost the 3 major clients that kept her firm afloat. Turns out, when you build a brand on authenticity and connection, getting publicly exposed as a homewrecker tends to hurt your credibility. I should have felt a surge of vindication, a rush of triumphant joy. But honestly, I mostly felt nothing. Their downfall wasn't a victory, it was a consequence, as natural and predictable as gravity. They had made their choices, day after day, for months. Now, they were simply living with the results. Are you dating? I asked, changing the subject. Reed looked up from his phone and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face for the first time since I'd known him. It transformed his entire face, erasing the tired lines around his eyes. I met someone, he said. Her name is Catherine. She's a pediatrician at Mount Sinai. He paused, and his smile widened. She actually works her night shifts. No mysterious conferences. No contacts saved as a Pilates instructor. That's wonderful, Reed. Truly, I said, and I meant it. A wave of genuine happiness for him washed over me. We had been through the fire together, and seeing him come out the other side, finding something real, felt like a victory for both of us. Your turn, he said, his eyes kind. Anyone? I thought about David, the chef I'd met at the Union Square Green Market 3 weeks ago. I had been admiring the heirloom tomatoes at a farmer's stall when a man with flour dusting his forearms asked me if I knew how to make a good tomato sauce. He had the kindest eyes and a laugh that was loud and uninhibited. He'd asked for my number while holding 2 giant zucchinis. His hands were stained purple from handling beets. On our first date, he couldn't hide where he'd been. His fingers smelled faintly of rosemary and garlic from his restaurant's prep work. It was the most honest and reassuring scent in the world. Maybe, I admitted, a small smile playing on my lips. A chef. It's early days. A chef is perfect, Reed said with a laugh. A built-in lie detector. He can't claim he was at work if he doesn't smell like garlic. We started meeting monthly after that, at the same coffee shop, at the same corner table. It became a ritual. We weren't clinging to shared trauma anymore, we had become actual friends. Who else could truly understand the specific, bizarre betrayal of discovering your spouse's affair through a detailed analysis of Instagram stories and credit card receipts? 1 month, Reed brought Catherine along. She was lovely, warm, direct, and funny, with tired eyes that came from actual late-night shifts saving children, not fabricated ones. She shook my hand firmly and said, I wanted to meet the woman who helped Reed survive. Most people just say get over it, like it's that simple. They don't get that a betrayal like that rewires your brain. You saved him from going through that alone. The following month, I brought David. He and Reed bonded immediately over their mutual confusion about how anyone could throw away a marriage for something so cheap. David, whose restaurant closed at 11 p.m. every single night without fail, couldn't fathom the sheer logistics of our ex's deception. I barely have enough energy to shower after service, he said, shaking his head. Managing a double life sounds exhausting. My new life began to take shape, built not on grand gestures and expensive gifts, but on 1,000 small, solid truths. My new apartment was half the size of the one I shared with Garrett, but it was filled with light and plants and books I actually wanted to read. I painted the living room a cheerful, sunny yellow, a color Garrett would have called tacky. I bought a slightly worn, ridiculously comfortable armchair from a flea market, a stark contrast to the stiff, designer furniture he had insisted on. This place was mine. It was a sanctuary of my own making. 6 months later, Cole and Brooke's first anniversary arrived. They decided to host a small, casual barbecue at my parents' house, in the same dining room where Garrett had first announced Paige's invitation. But now, the room was filled with genuine laughter instead of suffocating lies. David came with me, and he brought dessert, individual chocolate soufflés he'd made that morning, each one puffed up and perfect. He didn't try to impress anyone. He just was himself. He charmed my mother with stories about his grandmother's Sicilian recipes, helped my father with the grill without being asked, and he didn't check his phone once during the entire dinner. The sheer, blissful absence of deception was intoxicating. When Cole clinked his glass for a toast, he called me up to stand beside him. A year ago, at our rehearsal dinner, my sister taught us all something important, he said, grinning, his arm around my shoulders. She showed us that the truth, even when it detonates like a bomb at a formal dinner, is always better than living a beautiful lie. She taught us about courage. So, for our first anniversary, my toast is to my big sister, Audrey. May we all have the courage to trust our gut, to demand respect, and if necessary, to blow up a rehearsal dinner to save ourselves from beautiful deceptions. The whole room erupted in laughter and applause. Across the room, I caught Reed's eye. He was there with Catherine, and they were both glowing with the simple, uncomplicated happiness of an honest love. We raised our glasses to each other across the room, 2 survivors, acknowledging a shared, quiet victory. Later that night, back in my sunny yellow apartment, I sat in my comfy armchair and opened the journal my therapist had suggested I keep. I wrote about the party, about the easy laughter, about the way David had held my hand under the table. And then, I wrote about Garrett's words, the ones that had started everything, if you trust me, you'll get it. He'd been accidentally prophetic. I had trusted him, blindly, for years. And in the end, I did get it. I got that trust without verification is just a willing suspension of disbelief. I got that love without respect is simply a prettier form of manipulation. I got that staying in a beautiful lie hurts infinitely more than embracing an ugly truth. But mostly, I got myself back. The woman who had existed before I'd shrunk myself to fit into Garrett's deceptions. The one who could spot a lie from a mile away now, not because I was cynical, but because I had finally learned to trust my own intuition. The woman who valued truth over comfort and dignity over illusion. I had learned that the best revenge wasn't watching someone else's life crumble, it was rebuilding your own into a fortress they could never touch again. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a text from David. Closing up the restaurant. Saved you the last piece of that chocolate cake you like. Also, I smell like fish stock, so you'll know exactly where I've been. I laughed, a sound that was genuine and free. This was it. This was what honest love looked like. Unglamorous, verifiable, and somehow more romantic than any Cartier bracelet or grand, empty gesture. I closed the journal and looked out at the city lights. It was the same view that had once witnessed the destruction of my marriage, but now, it just looked like a city full of possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Next year might bring entirely different struggles. But tonight, I was free. Free from lies. Free from manipulation. Free from ever again wondering where my husband really was. Free to love again, but this time, with my eyes wide open, knowing that real love never asks you to ignore what you can clearly see. The Mont Blanc pen sat in a cup on my desk, a stark, black reminder. Sometimes, the best gifts come from the worst people. And sometimes, endings written with expensive pens lead to the most beautiful beginnings, written in simple, unglamorous, glorious truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been through anything like this, please know you are not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please, don't forget to subscribe for more stories. You never know when you might need to hear one.